the Ted Turner who'd go out and push the ball with his nose down to home plate?
He got older.
And less fun?
Probably.
You said network presidents were essentially guilty of treason and should be lined up and shot.
Well, what I wanted to do was scare him a little bit. I was certainly prone to say more outrageous things than I am now, perhaps going a little bit overboard, too.
This is Joey Wade. Joey was born with spina bifida, an enlarged head and a hole in his back. If doctors had decided not to operate, it's almost certain he would have died. In the case of Stonewall Jackson Smith, the doctors decided not to operate. He died aged 7 weeks. The Smiths accused the doctors of a kind of arrogance that denied them the right to raise their baby, that the doctors made non-medical decisions. You feel that you were treated differently because you didn't have a lot of money?
Definitely. I'll agree on that 100%.
Some of them call me the Red Sinatra, and some of them call me the Johnny Cash, New York Times, Johnny Cash of communism, and others call me the Elvis of South America. You know, I'm just Dean from Denver, Mike.
My name is known in half the world. I'm called a superstar.
He's as popular now with young Russians as Bruce Springsteen is with young Americans. And he still holds on to his American passport and his American citizenship.
Sometimes gets me down. Nobody knows me back in my hotel. Oh, nobody knows me back in my hotel.
I'm Mike Wallace.
I'm Morley Safer.
I'm Harry Reasoner. I'm Ed Bradley.
I'm Diane Sawyer. Those stories and more tonight on 60 Minutes. There was a startling rumor. Someone was mounting a takeover attempt against one of the great bastions of broadcasting. That bastion of broadcasting was this network. That someone was none other than Ted Turner, the maverick entrepreneur, who, thwarted in his attempt to take over CBS, last month bought MGM, the sailor who won the America's Cup in 1977 and went on to launch the cable news network. An unpredictable competitor, the kind of guy who was always mouthing off about something, especially about the programs on network TV. Ever since his bid to take over CBS, we've been asking Turner for an interview. This month, he finally said yes, and right off the bat, the guy they used to call the mouth of the South wanted us to know that he was a changed man. We caught up with him in Florida, where the team he owns, the Atlanta Braves, was in spring training.
What happened to the Ted Turner who'd go out and push the ball with his nose down to home plate?
He got older.
And less fun?
Probably. I'd say I'm not having as much fun as I used to. I'm working harder. Mainly working harder. I've gotten more serious. More concerned about the world and the nation's problems since I got in the news business. I mean, you never see anybody with 60 Minutes smile, do you?
Ted Turner's news business is CNN, the 24-hour cable network he started 6 years ago. At that time, he was already the reigning hero of the cable industry for having the bright idea to hook his failing UHF station up to a satellite, beaming its programming across the country, creating the first superstation, WTBS.
My cable network keeps America ahead with 24-hour news.
But Turner was not content to be a cable mogul. He's always in motion.
Tell him to sit tight.
Whether it's hustling other people's products on TV ads,
It'll even tell you which way the wind's blowing.
or whether it's hustling himself and his daring ideas.
This is a GE.
This is a Turner.
I still consider myself a bold adventurer.
In what way?
Well, the CBS Takeover attempt was a bold adventure. And the MGM acquisition is a bold adventure. And having the courage to face the 60 Minutes crew is a bold adventure.
On the first 2 out of 3, Turner was certainly right. His bid for CBS was quite a gambit.
We have decided to attempt to have the shareholders of CBS decide for themselves whether they would like to have Turner Broadcasting acquire control of CBS.
Turner's takeover bid failed. But what would he have done with CBS if he'd won?
I mean, I don't spend my time going every one of the network primetime shows, but it's, you know, there's too much sleaze and too much violence and too much materialism and too much stupidity in a lot of the network shows. Not all of them, certainly. Some of them are okay, I'm sure.
So if you were a network president right now, what would you do? You'd take Dallas off the air?
No, I wouldn't take it off the air. I would try and make the people a little bit nicer. That might hurt the ratings. It'd be a high wire balancing act. I think the American people have been fed so much trash and violence for so long that they're addicted to it.
But where are these violent programs that you're talking about right now?
I don't know specifically.
And why doesn't Turner know?
I don't watch it very much, so but I have people that do watch it. My wife watches it for me, and Bob Wessler, former president of CBS, watches it. I think there's too much trash still on the networks.
You mean you allow other people to give you your opinion about television?
Absolutely. I certainly do. Of course. I can't watch everything. I don't have time. I've got 3 24-hour networks now. I haven't got time to watch them enough.
What happened to the man who said that CBS was a cheap whorehouse taken over by sleaze artists?
I said that years ago. I was more of a crusader then than I am now, but I really felt that way at the time.
Tell me if you agree with this statement. In my opinion, the greatest enemies America has
ever had, posing a greater threat to our way of life than Nazi Germany or Tojo's Japan, are the 3 television networks and the people that run them who are living amongst us and constantly tearing down everything that has made this country great. And what are they doing it for? For a handful of dollars. I still believe that the networks have been a terrible, terrible negative influence on our country, particularly the last 20 years.
You said network presidents were essentially guilty of treason and should be lined up and shot.
Well, what I wanted to do was scare them a little bit.
Do you believe that?
Well, I mean, there was a lot of, if you recall, even the President of the United States, or several presidents, were highly critical of the way the networks covered the Vietnam War.
CNN has broadcast some reports the administration didn't like.
Oh, of course we have. Of course we have. There's no question about that. If you're in the news business, you're going to
broadcast a report, say, from El Salvador, where there's a real struggle going on? Is it treason to broadcast a report that damages the government's position?
No.
What's the difference then?
Well, I wasn't at the time I made that statement, too. I didn't know as much as I know now. I was certainly prone to say more outrageous things than I am now, perhaps going a little bit overboard, too.
Okay, here's your chance. 60 Minutes.
60 Minutes, I find out, has done a hatchet job on just about everybody of importance, every institution we have over the last 20 years, and they have very few friends as a result of it.
And what would Turner do with 60 Minutes?
I would just try and increase the objectivity of it. Well, I got that from lots of people that told me about it.
You don't watch 60 Minutes?
No, not regularly.
But what do you really think he would have done with CBS?
Nothing. I think he would have just sat there and enjoyed it.
Rich McDonald, a securities analyst at First Boston Corporation who has worked with Turner, says Turner's strength is not the follow-up, but the vision that gets it all started.
Turner's a bit of an artist in a way. He is. He's a bit of an artist. I mean, he makes up things
as he goes along.
Yeah, and he makes things happen, and he works straight from the gut. It's very simple.
Hey, Taylor, what did we were 15 3/8 yesterday?
Within weeks after he lost his bid for CBS, Turner had a new target, MGM Studios. The New York Times illustration said it all. Ted Turner moving in on Scarlett O'Hara, just like Rhett Butler did in the MGM movie Gone with the Wind. Now Turner owns the epic movie he loved as a child, but he's put himself into an epic amount of debt to do it. Turner says it will all pay off when he broadcasts the old MGM pictures on his superstation.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
And if Turner gives a damn, he wouldn't admit it to talk show host Larry King, who asked him how he's going to pay it all back.
When someone owes a bank like $500 million, do you get a payment book?
No, I don't know. I mean, the debt is staggering. It's going to be close to $2 billion, but, you know, that's more than some third world countries are.
How did Ted Turner from Atlanta get in more debt than some third world countries? How did the man they called Captain Outrageous, when he celebrated a little too much after his America's Cup yachting victory in 1977, also get so much tenacity and drive? Turner's father was the owner of a successful billboard company. Ted, the playboy, was kicked out of college. He eventually came home and worked for his dad.
My father was one of those colorful, rugged individualists that grew up in the Depression, and he volunteered in World War II. He was a terrific, very imaginative, hardworking, creative guy that had a lot of influence on me.
I read once that he had you paying rent at home in order to teach you discipline.
That's right. And he did that. He believed, and I think it was good training. He figured that the tougher that you had it while you were young, the easier it would be for you when you grew up.
But when Turner was 24, his father sold the billboard business out from under him and then committed suicide. Turner bought the business back and began building his empire.
You still think about whether he'd approve of you?
If I had one wish, it would probably, you know, for something that would give me personal joy and satisfaction, it would be to have him come back and show him around.
What would you want to show him?
Well, I'd like to show him the whole shooting match. I really would. I think he'd really enjoy it.
You've got to be Ted Turner.
I am.
You flew in your own plane?
Yes, ma'am.
Our little local airport?
That's right.
One thing's clear, Ted Turner really enjoys being Ted Turner, even though sometimes you wonder if even he knows what he's going to say next.
Italians. Imagine the Italians at war. I mean, what a joke. They didn't belong in the last war. They were sorry they were in it. They were glad to get out of it. You know, they'd rather be involved in crime and just making some wine and having a good time. You know.
If you're having trouble getting a handle on Ted Turner, think about conservative Senator Jesse Helms, who used to say he'd like to see Turner take over CBS. Has Senator Helms heard Turner on this subject?
When I met with Castro and spent a weekend with him, I said to him, damn communist. I said, finally I got up my courage after 3 drinks of rum with him, and I said, are you interfering in Nicaragua and Angola? He said, yeah, you are too. I said, yeah, but we're the United States. We got every right to be there. He said, how come? I said, because we're right. We're capitalists. We got a free country. He said, yeah, but what about people that don't agree with that? I said, I went back and scratched my head. I'd never even thought that there was another side to the picture.
Can you trust him?
I would trust him, yes. I mean, he trusted me. He gave me a loaded gun when we went hunting together. I could have shot him very easily. I would have been dead within a few minutes myself, maybe even a few seconds, but there's no question I could have blown his head off if I'd wanted to.
And what about the Ted Turner who supports abortion rights, whose network was the only one to run this controversial public service spot on teenage pregnancy?
I intended to have a family, but not this soon.
The same Turner is a friend of Reverend Jerry Falwell.
I've certainly talked to Jerry about it in this very room. And I said to Jerry, Jerry, you're not born until you're born normally. And I can prove it to you. It's not murder. Abortion is not murder. And he said, well, you can't prove it. I said, oh, yes, I can. And he said, well, how? I said, because you don't have funerals for miscarriages. That sent him scratching his head. It didn't change his opinion about making abortions illegal, but it stumped him for a while.
Turner's conservative friends might also be scratching their heads about his $500,000 donation last year to start the Better World Society, which produces programming about overpopulation, the environment, and nuclear disarmament.
Well, the Soviet threat is a threat if we want it to be a threat. But if you want to make friends with someone, it's like a feud. It's like the two families in Romeo and Juliet, or the Hatfield and the McCoys. We've been feuding with the Soviets for so long that I don't even think people really remember how the whole thing got started. And I think it's after 40 years it's time to call it off. I think, we could declare the arms race a tie.
It's as simple as being friends, as you and
It's
Castro?
very hard. If you're going to trust someone, and if you're going to stop fighting with them, it certainly helps to become friends with them, because that's the one way that you can be sure that they won't hurt you, because nobody will hurt their friends.
Some people might say that's a little naive when it comes to the Soviets.
I don't, I mean, it may be a little naive, but it's certainly true.
And indeed, it wouldn't be the first time Turner's naive enthusiasm paid off. He has managed to bypass the U.S. Olympic Committee and link up with the Soviets, his new business partners, to create a whole new international sports competition in Moscow called the Goodwill Games, all to be broadcast this July on Turner Superstation. It was clear when Turner talked with a room full of potential advertisers that he's hoping what's good for peace is good for profits.
I guess that it's probably, in the history of our two nations, since we defeated Germany in World War II, it's probably the biggest cooperative venture between the Soviets and the United States.
So when Ted Turner sits in his office these days, listening to the heroic music composed for the Goodwill Games, who knows what he thinks about? Now that he's burdened with the MGM debt, and now that ABC and NBC have been bought by someone else, does he really still dream about a big network of his own?
It would really be a real challenge to have one of the big three, to be in control of one of the big three for a while. That dream is still far off at the current time. But we're going to be around. At least we haven't changed ownership like NBC and ABC have. And CBS, you never know how long it's going to hang in there.
Take the boy out of the country, but never the country out of the boy. And I believe that. I'm an American.
1, 2, 3, 5, 4, 5, 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, right. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock, go right.
This is Richard Chamberlain inviting you to join me as the saga of John Charles Fremont continues. Tonight, one man's dream becomes a mission of doom, and our nation faces its toughest challenge. The stirring conclusion of Dream West. Next.
Head on down to Lonely Street.